Today's episode is brought to you by our sponsoring partner, the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. CBMA is a national membership network that's built a vibrant community of over 5,700 members and more than 2,700 organizations that's been working together over the past decade to build beloved communities across America where Black men and boys are healthy, thriving, and enabled to achieve their fullest potential. If you're interested in learning more, hop on over right now to tbpod.com/partners and consider joining the membership or donating to help them scale the impact of this growing field of Black male achievement.
You're listening to the Trailblazers.fm podcast, where we'll explore the stories of today's successful Black professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders. Join us to access the knowledge, resources, and tools of these accomplished professionals and come away with the know-how, confidence, and motivation you'll need to blaze your trail. And now, here's your host, Stephen A. Hart.
Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of the Trailblazers.fm podcast. I'm your host, Stephen A. Hart. For the past 3 years, we have been in an amazing partnership with and been supported by the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. And CBMA's CEO is a dear brother, Mr. Sean Dove. And Sean and I, at the beginning of this year, we started having discussions about co-producing a series on the podcast. And so for the month of September, CBMA and Trailblazers.fm have decided to feature 5 amazing trailblazers who are doing awesome work in the area of Black male achievement. And so our first featured guest for this series today is Tonya Allen. Tonya is the CEO of the Skillman Foundation. It's a Detroit-based regional foundation that's been working to ensure that Detroit youth have access to high-quality educational and economic opportunities, and also a strong, broad network of champions that work on behalf of young people's interests. Before we dive in and I share my conversation with Tonya, I wanted to give a special big ups to the handle Michaela Mango, love that handle, who left us a 5-star rating and a review over on Apple Podcast titled Inspired. The review reads, "Newbie listener here. As a creative balancing 9 to 5 on entrepreneurship, these conversations are amazing. Keep up the great work." Big ups to Michaela Mango. Love that handle. Thank you so much for leaving us that dope 5-star rating and review. Listen up, Blazer Nation. Whether this is your first time listening or your 187th time listening, you are part of our community. And if you're listening over on Apple Podcasts and you've not yet left us a review there, I'm going to ask you to do us a solid. Hop into your Apple Podcasts app on your iPhone. Search Trailblazers.fm like you're looking us up for the very first time. You want to go ahead and click on the podcast cover art. Scroll down to where you see ratings and reviews. And the app typically is going to show you our latest review. And right below that review is a link titled Write a Review. If you click on that link, I want you to go ahead and share your honest thoughts on what you've learned by way of consuming the content on this show. I'm praying and I'm hoping that you leave us a 5-star review, but that's strictly up to you to leave whatever you feel is worthy and honest, right? Either way, it's going to help us with the quantity of reviews and ratings in the Apple database so that other people can find out about Trailblazers.fm. And that's my heart, right? I just want us to spread the news about this podcast and get more people to consume this content, which I think is very helpful, right? So much appreciated for you helping us out there. That said, go ahead and grab a pad and a pen or open your favorite note-taking app. Now let's get set to receive today's mission field from our featured trailblazer for today, Tonya Allen. Hello, Tonya.
Oh, hi, Stephen. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Most definitely. It's such a pleasure and an honor to have you in this conversation. So we love to kick things off from a place of grace and gratitude. And in that spirit this morning, I wanted to ask you, what's an unexpected blessing that you're most grateful for right now?
Yeah, I love that question. And I was thinking about this a little bit this morning, and I am really grateful for this broader discussion about equity, racial equity, and what it means to be an equitable organization. And, I think a lot of times people confuse representation with equity. And we look at organizations that might be led by African American people and we think, oh, that's an equitable organization. Well, in actuality, it isn't. What it is a organization that has a person of color at the head of it. Now, whether or not that person of color, just like in an organization with a white leader, are they actually owning what it means to be equitable? And so I just think that this whole conversation is forcing people to behave and think differently, acting differently, changing policy, changing practices. It's extraordinarily hard work. I always say inclusion is messy, but it makes me feel really grateful that as a leader, I have the opportunity to really question everything and to make sure that we show up around the values that we have.
Right. I am so excited to talk with you a bit more about that. I'm curious, did you grow up? I just wanted to take you back for a second. Did you grow up in Detroit?
I did. I'm a Detroiter. What up, though?
What's maybe one of your fondest memories growing up in Detroit?
Yeah, I think my fondest memories were when I grew up in Detroit was actually growing up in neighborhoods. Detroit is a community of single family homes. And so one of the great things about Detroit is that if you lived here, you were able to live in a home where you had a front yard, a backyard, and that you would be in a community where there were lots of children and adults watching over you. And so I just think about growing up with my grandmother on her block and all of those, being in a really diverse community, playing with kids. And a fun fact about that was, what was the name of that movie, Hollywood Cop? What was it with Eddie Murphy? You know that movie? You don't even know it. That's how young you are.
No. I'm 42, but I know you're talking about. I'm trying to think of it.
It was done, taped right around the corner from my grandmother's house. And so, when he did some of the scenes in Detroit. And so it was just a big fun deal for all of us kids to be there watching the movie created right in our backyard. And for that movie to really be such an iconic film.
Yeah, you're saying that and you're bringing me back. I grew up in Kingston in the 80s, and I remember being in that kind of environment where, and I'm thinking of my own kids right now. My daughter is 9, my son is 5, and I don't feel as comfortable letting them run wild around our neighborhood like I did growing up. Back then it was a tight-knit community. We could be outside. We were outside pretty much all the time. And just, you brought me back there for a second.
I think part of the challenge, Stephen, I'll just say this quickly, is that I do think that what the limitations on that is that being outside, doing those things, you are exploring and expanding your world and giving yourself, you were getting boundaries. And I think, for a lot of children, they don't have that. They're not exploring. They don't have curiosity in the same way. Mm-hmm. And they're not getting the kind of natural consequences of what those boundaries look like that we all have to learn. And my hope is that, we figure out ways to make sure that young people feel capable and confident to navigate the world around them and not with adult supervision, because that's how you grow up.
That is so true. That's a great point. Fuel for thought entering this weekend. Talk to me about your early career before you joined Skillman.
Yeah, so when I left Detroit, I went to the University of Michigan and did my undergrad and grad work there. And so when I came back after school, I really basically spent my time really thinking about how to influence neighborhoods and how to organize people to change their neighborhoods. So I did pretty much community organizing and worked with parents to think about how to improve their schools. I, worked with residents and neighborhoods to think about how to really build an infrastructure of block clubs and to really be change agents and to own their power. I mean, I think that's what my work was really about, from working in churches, et cetera. But what I would tell you about that early experience is that as an organizer, there's this mantra that, power is organized people or organized money. And what I learned in that my first body of work was that there were so many people working on organizing people and very few people thinking about how you organize money. And so that was really the trajectory of my career, really thinking about, okay, how do I organize money? And I felt like philanthropy was a way that I could begin to think about how you organize money that is already intended for good, but also how do you get other people to invest in similar ideas that would benefit the people that I was hoping to invest in and to support. And so that was really it. And it pushed me right into philanthropy. I worked national philanthropy, local philanthropy in Detroit, and went back and forth between philanthropy and kind of community organizing, even if I might have been a nonprofit leader. And most people would say I'm still organizing, right? That's what I do. I organize in the position I am in, always with the intent of taking a little and making that a lot and see how that can lever other opportunities for us.
Right. I know you must be really excited that Sasha Obama announced that she's becoming a Wolverine, huh?
Yes, we're very excited about that. But we're also very excited that it was announced again that we are the #1 public institution in the country, and we just want some respect on our name.
Put some respect on it. I love it. So you've been at Skillman for 15 years, right? Tell us a little. A lot of people listening to this call don't know about Skillman. So tell us about Skillman and tell us, maybe what's driving you in the work that you're doing 15 years in now.
Yeah, so the Skillman Foundation is a private foundation that focuses on children issues in Detroit. It is, next year, we'll celebrate our 60th year as a foundation. And it has been a foundation in Detroit that I think has been a driver around improving issues, systems, and programs that will impact kids. And so under my leadership, the work at the foundation is about creating an opportunity agenda for Detroit's children. So we know that opportunities are closing in, right? Like talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. And so instead of trying to help kids beat the odds, our work is about changing the odds for children. So we're looking at what are the systems around education that prevent our young people from actually fulfilling their brilliance and their possibilities. How do we make sure that young people understand what's happening in the economy, which is changing so rapidly and which is being disrupted rapidly? So how do we make sure that we're preparing them with a set of work skills that actually allow them to prosper and kind of have a rock climbing approach rather than a career ladder, because we know that that's not what's going to happen. So how do we equip them with the sets of skills that they would need to do that? And then we always are looking at things that we believe are going to be benchmarks. So how do we set goals in our community and aim to achieve those goals with the collective action of other people? And so we're focusing mostly on 3 things that we believe help us tell whether or not we're being successful. Are we moving 3rd grade reading scores for our young people? Are we actually making sure that high school graduation is meaningful, meaning that not only are they graduating, but are they ready to go into careers? Are they going on to college? And are they sticking with whatever pathway that they chose? And then last is about whether young people view themselves as having opportunity and do they have hope for their future? And, that's something that I don't think many people talk about, but we all know that hope is a bigger drive. It has more significance and more importance to your trajectory is that do you believe that it can happen? Do you believe it is possible? Right. And so we really want to make sure that young people in Detroit feel loved and hopeful and understand that they are the successors to the city and that they will inherit it. And are we preparing them, equipping them to steward it for the next generation?
Right. I had a complete explosion in my mind just now when you talked about a career ladder versus rock climb, because I feel like I can relate to that. I'm a serial entrepreneur, still in the 9-to-5, and my career journey has been all over the board, much like a rock climb versus a climb up a ladder. So I can relate to that personally. And I think even more so with the next generation, they're going to have to embrace that a bit more too than, a 30-year experience of one particular employer or even industry, right? Because they might jump from industry to industry. Tonya, I talked about CBMA and Black male achievement on this show quite a bit. I've welcomed several partners of CBMA on the show. And in this series, I want to unpack a little bit more around Black male achievement. And so I thought, I love to break things down to the very basic, right? So in your words, what should we think of when we hear the term Black male achievement?
Well, what I would say, Black male achievement should be a part of our normal vocabulary. And what I mean by that is simply, these are words that should describe our norm, not our aspiration, right? Wow. That we believe that all Black men are going to be successful, that they're going to achieve, and that we know that there are structures and systems, histories, biases that prevent that from happening. But we have for a long time talked about those challenges and those barriers as things that Black men have constructed, rather than these are things that Black men have to challenge or overcome in the face of their pursuit to, just achieve who they are and to just live a fulfilling life. People sometimes ask me why I got into this space, and I will tell them it's because when I went out into neighborhoods, because, I told you my work is rooted in neighborhoods and schools, I would talk to parents about the things that they care deeply about. And almost every conversation I had, there was a woman there who said, help us save our boys. Help us save our boys. And it wasn't to say that they didn't care deeply about their girls, but they could not name all of the challenges that were facing their boys, and they could feel it. It was palpable for them. And as much as they were working hard to protect their children, they knew that their children couldn't, even though they were doing as much as they could, it would be very difficult for them to navigate all of the challenges and the barriers. And it would be very difficult for them to achieve what they should achieve just like any other child. And so that just became an important clarion call in my life, was that, you know what, we can't ignore this just because it's what society has told us that it's normal when we know it's not. We know that these things exist. And so it just feels to me like you can't talk about Black uplift, you can't talk about community uplift, you can't talk about children well-being without talking about how Black men are doing, right? They are cornerstones to our community. And if we aren't making sure that they're successful, it's that, a cycle that reinforces everything. Like, if to me, Black men are a bellwether for the Black community. They're the bellwether for Black children. If Black men are doing well, then I think that they're an indicator that the full community is healthier and doing better. If they're not doing well, it's an indicator that we're struggling. And so we have to do more. It has to be collective. I don't think it's about doing just Black men work and not focusing on girls. I don't think it's just about one or the other, but we have to figure out how to do targeted work at the same time that we're doing broad, collective, and expansive work. Yeah. It's time for us to stop using this narrative that it's an either or. It has to be a both and if we really want to change the trajectory of our communities.
Yeah. I'd even say beyond the Black community and beyond the Black household, right? Like, all communities would thrive if our Black men are in fact thriving, right?
Right. I agree. Can I just say one other thing about that, Stephen? And I'm glad you said it, because I often say that the way that we talk about this work as if it's a Black man problem. No, this is an American problem.
Exactly.
Right? Like, this is the construct of our country, and our country is responsible for fixing this problem, not Black people, right? Like, we as a country need to be thinking about it, because it creates a vulnerability for us as a country, for not only the stability of our economy and the growth of our economy. It's about who we will be as the country in the future and whether or not we choose to continue to be a dominant force in this world. You can tie that to how well Black men are doing. And so I'm glad you raised that point, because we should not be thinking about this just as this is not a Black people problem. This is an American problem, and it takes a full America to respond.
Most definitely. And you've been in this work more than a decade now, right? And probably one of the most catalytic female leaders in the BMA arena in this field. You presently serve, I don't think I shared this, but you're the chair of the CBMA board and also the co-chair of the Executives Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. Tell me, what are some of the bigger challenges, especially as a female leader, that you're seeing right now in the BMA space today?
Well, I don't see any challenges as a female leader. What I will tell you is that I think that just getting to this point we had about whose problem is this, is that I think that Black men, because they know the problem so intimately, they feel like they need to own the solution. And I think that that's a false narrative, right? So how men do is as connected to how Black women do. And so we have to think about it collectively. So I don't feel like I have to push into this space because I don't believe that Black men own it. And so for me, it's always felt like this is mission work. I often describe it as hard work and heart work. And so we have to lean in on that. So I don't see it as a challenge being a woman. I think the challenge is really about making sure that we frame this issue in a way that everybody sees how they can contribute to it, how we can collectively create a solution. That's what I would say. And I think if we can take these conversations about how Black men are doing or how Black male achievement and marry that with the issues that we need to talk about in gender, around the intersections of gender and how Black women show up in this issue, not just in supporting Black men, but how Black men support Black women and how we sometimes don't support each other or how we allow certain things like patriarchy or gender bias just seep into our relationships, that it creates an opportunity for us to have, I think, really important conversations about what does healthy relationships look like, what does healthy structure looks like in our community, that we look to solve for all of the problems rather than just solving for one or reinforcing what we learn in this country.
Tonya, how are you using your seat at the table, right? Because you talked about the lack of focus on organizing the money. How are you positioning your mission and your work going forward to shift some of that philanthropic dollars towards this space?
Yeah, so I would say, I think the first thing that I try to use my seat at the table is to focus on results. So I think for a long time, when you think about this field, for a very long time, what we loved to do was, think about the problem, wax on about the problem, right? We even preach about the problem. And so what I focused on really is, what's the result? What are we trying to achieve? I know that this is embedded in complex systems and biases and history, but what is it that we're trying to get done? So we might not be able to get it all fixed, but we can get a few things moving in the right direction. So I tend to be a results-oriented leader. I try to have everybody have a clear vision about what we're trying to achieve. And then I think if you operate with intentionality and that you're measuring, right? I always think about data as data doesn't define you, but it should definitely inform you. And so how are we using that data to inform whether or not we're moving down a trajectory? And so my seat at the table is about let's get off this conversation. Let's start doing the work, and then we can perfect the work as we go, right? And if there's some things that we haven't gotten done, somebody else can get that done. Right. But let's not leave it all this huge, big, tangled mess and say that we couldn't move it far enough because we never got to any focus or intentionality. And I think that when you get focus and intentionality, when you get to success, then money will follow. I mean, at the work in Detroit, we focused some years ago on high school graduation. And we went from a kind of a 68% graduation to a 78% graduation in Detroit. It's 63 to 78. 15 percentage points, but 25% increase. One of the things that we found was that by focusing in on that and focusing in on boys, that boys actually had a greater percentage of them were graduating. And it was because we had this intentionality in the school system and the youth development field where people were talking to each other and making sure that boys weren't falling through the cracks. So we were really intentional about doing that. And then when you see that it can be achieved, then there's no longer this debate in Detroit about whether or not we can move girls in graduation rate, but we can't move boys. No, we can move everybody. But it requires for us to be able to help and support boys that we got to put more additional supports around, which is an equity play, right? So that changes the narrative, it changes the actions, it changes the behaviors. And now you have people working on other issues that I think will support not only boys and men, but it supports girls and women because you have proof points. And I think that's how I think about my role in the field is how do I help us sharpen our vision on proof points that this work can be done, and how do we get it done so that we're not just talking about the issue, that we're actually showing that this issue can change.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love so much of what you just said. I'm a big believer in having that long-term vision and doing that work almost in reverse to kind of get yourself to that end vision that you have. I've seen you share your self-proclaimed idea-preneur, right? And you're talking about, I think we all as creatives kind of relate to that framing of an idea-preneur. But I love that you talk about getting the results, having the end in mind. Could you talk to me maybe about what it takes? Because so many people listening are social entrepreneurs, right? But there are many who maybe in the corporate structure or are in for-profit businesses of their own. What does it take to transform from that idea that we have, right? To take it from idea to beginning to implement and get to that real tangible result and impact?
Yeah, I think it takes courage. So I think that a lot of people have I think courage, and you don't have to own the idea. So for me, I am thinking about how we connect ideas together. What does it take to actually get the idea to come to fruition? And just because I might have the idea or help curate the idea with other people, I don't need to own the idea. So I have to let go my own ownership of it, and which is about ego, right? Let go your ego to make sure that the idea actually moves. And so there have been so many things where I've brainstormed and we're talking to people about it. Thinking about what people's self-interests are and what opportunities exist. And we come up with ideas. They go off, they've implemented the ideas. Will they ever say that, Tonya helped me think this through? Probably not, but I don't care. Because what I care about is the impact of the idea, not ownership of it. And so, and not to say that I don't ever care. I do, but I have to always kind of put my ego in check around that. Is it about me, or is it about whether or not we get good things done for people that we care about in our community? And then I think the second is courage. What I find is that people know, sometimes they don't know what to do or how to do it, but they're stagnated because they're afraid that they're going to do the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. Or
so they do nothing at all.
Order.
Yeah.
So they do nothing at all, or they do enough that makes you feel like you've done something, but you don't have to own the responsibility for the idea not actually coming to fruition. Mm-hmm. And so I find that what I'm always pushing on is get exact, get intentional, and move. Just move. If we can get people to have some momentum around it, even if it's not successful, not being successful doesn't mean that you are a failure. Mm-hmm. And I think that people think that, they believe if you're not successful in whatever you pursue, that you're a failure. No, you just are learning and leaning forward into whatever it might be. You're going to learn. You're going to learn.
Those failures are learning lessons, right?
Yeah. putting it into practice, and you go at it the next time. And being the kind of idea-preneur, in my perspective, is not necessarily coming up with new ideas, but understanding that ideas might be right for different time frames and for different environments. So something that was a great idea in 1999, and you felt, you might feel like this is a great idea. I tried it. It didn't work. And then what we put in our heads is this narrative like that idea didn't work. No, it's not that the idea didn't work. It might have been a better idea for 2019. And because there's a different environment, a different context. And so how do you bring those things back and be thinking about like what are the conditions for an idea to be successful, not just what the idea is?
Yeah. I mean, Detroit and the auto world, right? If we could use an analogy in that context, I mean, I'm thinking back to cars that were created in the late 70s, right? And you come forward, 30, 40 years out, that same car, that same make and model has now gone through years of iterations, right? And it is now so much more advanced, but you look over the course of time, right, at the progress made each and every year, they iterate and come up with a new model of that. You compare the 40th anniversary of to the very first make, and it looks night and day, but it was that consistency over time that got it to, be that much better. I think in the same light, sometimes we look at that first iteration. I go back and, we were joking about this 2 weeks ago. I was at a podcast conference around a table of podcasters. We all joke about our first episode of the podcast and how awful we all sound, right? But we stick with it. And now you're episode 187 and it's so much better. So I encourage everyone listening to take that first step, to take that action, as you've said, and continue to work at it over time. That consistency breeds success.
Right. Yeah. And understanding that you're creating and paving your pathway. I'm working on a big project now that is really high risk. And people keep saying, well, what if you fail? I'm like, well, if I fail, then that means I got a higher platform, right? Like it means that actually I have a better shot the second time I go after it, right? But, they're worried about the first time. I'm worried about winning. It's a difference, right? Like I'm not worried about failing. I'm worried about winning. And so I'm trying to create a trajectory or a pathway that allows me to win. And if I don't win the first time, that's okay. Like I have to be resilient and consistent and focus on it. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to win. Like much I know. That I am clear about.
That's right.
Now, when is the question, but I will do that.
I love it. Tonya, I know you're a busy lady. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I have two more questions for you. Our Blazer Nation, we affectionately call our community our Blazer Nation. They love to hear the resources of our guests. What book or books have you been reading that you think we should be adding to our queue this fall?
Yeah. So, I actually have been going back a little old school lately.
Yeah.
So I've been reading The Oz Principle, which is a management book that's really, from The Wizard of Oz, which is about like how all of these characters were basically living below the line of accountability in their own lives. And they needed somebody to come and spark them to believe that they could go get courage or go get brains or go get a heart. And then they were also depending on some great wizard to solve the problem for them, right? When in actuality, they have the capability to be able to do it themselves. And so I've been thinking a lot about that, about like, how do we all lift up our own individual accountability? How do we all begin to step above that line that says that I don't care what the consequences and what the conditions are, none of those things control who I am and how I show up. And when you control who you are and how you show up in every circumstance, even if you can't control that, you have a different level of power, personal power. And then when you do that as an organization, or if multiple people do that, then you have a level of collective power that is unstoppable. And so that I would encourage people to go back old school with me, read The Oz Principle.
I'm adding that to the queue for sure. That's awesome. Last question for you. What's one action that our Blazer Nation should take this week that's going to help them to blaze their trail?
I would say whatever it is that you haven't done And we all have something that's worrying us and we wish we would have done it. Or it's like something that you just haven't gotten to. I would say take that idea and break it down into 4 steps. What are you going to do? And then don't focus on step 2, 3, and 4. Just focus on step 1. And if it takes you 2 weeks to get through step 1, or if it takes you a year to get through step 1, make the commitment to take step 1.
I love it. Tonya Allen, thank you so very much for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Stephen A. Hart, and you've been listening to the Trailblazers.fm podcast. If you're not yet doing so, consider following Trailblazers.fm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and feel free to connect with me over on LinkedIn. Whenever you're posting stories or social media posts about Trailblazers.fm, be sure to use the hashtag TBPod and hashtag Mission Fuel. We'll be able to see you, and I'll be able to show some love. And in case you're not aware, our show notes for all our episodes can be found on our website over at tbpod.com. Now, if today was your first time listening, I just want to say big ups and enough respect for checking us out. You've made this Jamaican guy really happy that you're here with us today. And I'd love your help with keeping this Black excellence flowing each and every week. So if you haven't yet subscribed, hop on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Search Trailblazers.fm and subscribe, rate, and review us there. Be sure to browse through some of our past episodes. There are more than 150 published episodes now, and a little something is out there for everyone to help keep the knowledge flowing. We grow when you, as part of our Blazer Nation community, shares and invites your friends and family to listen to an episode you think might impact them most. We believe that someone listening to these inspiring stories are going to be moved to make significant changes that have generational impact for many others, both now and well into the future. Don't miss next week's episode. New episodes are released each and every Monday morning at 5 a.m. Eastern. Blazer Nation, go out today and find a way to rise above, go way beyond, and keep blazing your trail.